So, hi, welcome to the next session of Make It Your Own. We're currently exploring Pause B, and in this session, we're going to be discussing lessons 5 and 6. And I'm really lucky to have one of our fantastic trainers with us, Chris, who delivers Pause B and also DOTS training for Mindfulness in Schools project. So, really nice to have you here, Chris.
Thank you very much for having me. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, I wonder, Chris, if you would mind just sharing a little bit about the school that you work in. What sort of school is it, and how have you delivered Pause B? In what context?
Yeah, sure. So I'm in a state-run primary school, three form-entry in London, and I've been there for several years now. And I'm lucky enough to be able to come out of my classroom and deliver Pause B to classrooms around the school, but also to my own children in my unit. So I work in an SEN unit with children who have autism diagnosis and they're Key Stage 2. So Pause B has been really helpful in our curriculum, but also just recently did it as a after school club for years 3 and 4. And if that was successful, which it has been, I'm going to repeat that for 5 and 6 in the summer term. So really lucky to be able to do my day job, but also to come out and teach Pause around the school, which is a real lovely thing to do.
Yeah, fantastic. And I know that that's one of the things that people are thinking about. How do we have all of our students learn this curricula? And you doing what you're doing, which is going into other people's classes and delivering it, is one of the ways that you can do that if you've only got one teacher. But I know that soon you're going to have a second teacher on.
Yeah, because part of that I think is trying to inspire others to become interested in mindfulness themselves. And I'm also lucky to have done the SML, so I can lead the adults through their own 8-week courses. But I think it's a great way to go and kind of show it off really to other classrooms and get other teachers interested. And sometimes it takes a long time. It's kind of in my 6th year, and only now am I starting to have got people through their 8-week training, and now I've got one person doing the Pause B training, which is amazing. But it can be quite slow burning, and it's worth bearing in mind that it isn't always race to the end, and it does take time.
Yeah, you've been very, I think, very patient in
Yeah,
terms of allowing that journey to unfold in its own way, but it's really beginning to bear fruit now, isn't it?
definitely. And where you can't get to every class, the idea was, oh, let me try an after school club, because, okay, you can't get every child doing it, but you can at least hit 30, 40 a couple of times a year. So if you run it twice a year, it's still, I feel it's quite impactful.
And you were saying earlier about the fact that there's some difference between if you are teaching them in an after school club compared to if it's your class and you're delivering a lesson and your whole class is there. Are you okay to just share a little bit more about the differences you've noticed?
Yeah, I think there are pros and cons. One of the massive pros for children that come to an after school club is hopefully they've chosen to be there. If you go into a class, not all children want to hear what you've got to say. There's that as well. But also, so some of the good things is the children that have come to me who maybe ordinarily don't get on that well with kind of lessons in school really showed me that they looked happier, they looked more relaxed, and these were children that actually had diagnosis of ADHD and other learning difficulties, but yet in that environment. And I was saying to you earlier that when I go in, the first thing I say to them is, this 12 weeks there's no pens, no paper, and everyone's like whooping and punching the air and stuff. So in that way it's a very relaxed, informal environment, so some of those children can really thrive. But I suppose the other side of that is that when I go to speak to their teachers, and they might have had a really successful course with me, and I've seen a real growth and difference in their outlook and how they manage, how they're thinking about their behaviours and how they manage things, but I'll get a very different answer from their class teachers saying, actually, haven't seen hardly any difference in so and so in class. And I think one of the downsides might be that actually it's not woven into their everyday environment. So that's one thing to be mindful of. And I think for me, it's about maybe how can I join those things a bit more together, like offering some posters to be around the classroom, or maybe having one of the children that are particularly keen to encourage the teacher to allow space for practice and things like that. So I'm thinking about ways in which I can connect an after school club with a mainstream class when I don't have the luxury of being their class teacher. But I think generally speaking that it's a different environment for them. And when you catch them around the school and they see you, that you can see them, the cogs working and going, oh, I need to be maybe a little bit more aware of how I'm behaving in the dinner hall right now, because I can see that I've done some learning around it and I can apply it. But yeah, there's some really lovely things about it. And then there's things that I'm thinking, oh, I wonder how we can get that to be more embedded in their kind of everyday life. But it's been really lovely. It's been really enjoyable. And they've been years 3 and 4, but they've been so insightful with some of their kind of noticings around their own behaviours and managing their own kind of thoughts and things. It's been really lovely.
One of the things that we often say when we're training people is that we're seed sowing when we're offering the curricula. And I think that in this context, what you've just described there around that child hasn't necessarily then taken that into the rest of the school or maybe even at home as well, potentially. It's just that sometimes we expect immediate results, don't we, as well? And there's something about just allowing that to sit and for that child to notice. And you were saying about the fact that when he sees you, it's almost like you can see that he's checking in around his own awareness around his own behaviour and things like that. So it's just sometimes recognising as well that things can start slow and hopefully then grow. Who knows where that might go to? So open-ended in that respect, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So when it comes to delivering Paws B lessons, but maybe particularly these two lessons, lesson 5 and 6, do you teach them as they are, or have you adapted them in terms of the structure of the sessions?
I think with lesson 5, there's a physical kind of opening there with the wobbling practice. So what I sometimes do is and now that the weather's been really lovely, I'll take them outside. So again, sometimes if the lesson feels like I don't want to rush a lesson, so quite often I'll allow an hour for every lesson, because I think children have a lot to say and a lot to share, and I don't really, if I can help it, to not hear everybody. I mean, not necessarily viable in a class of 30, but when I was doing my after school club I had 16, so there was a bit more time for everyone to get their voice heard. But anyway, I do the wobbling practice. We've got like a little trim trail, which is like a wooden outdoor balancing. There's ropes, there's things you have to put your foot in to move across these tires, and then there's like beams and stuff, and it really lends itself well. So I try and think about using the outdoors for lesson 5, introducing the wobbling practice. And what I sometimes will do is let them go and have a play, just normally we're just going out to the trim trail and they'll just race around crazily, and then we'll just sit and have a little chat about, we're going to do this again. We've talked about mindful and mindless in previous lessons, so we can think about maybe having more of a mindful journey along the trim trail, but really thinking about our feet and our wobbles and where we're noticing. And so that can sometimes elongate the lesson, so I will just leave the latter bit for the following week. Sometimes when I've done it with my SEN children, we'll actually make some snow globes, so that sometimes takes some time. And in that lesson I don't normally go to the worksheets, because I've promised the children, really made a verbal promise that there'll be no writing and stuff, but sometimes where it's relevant, and if particularly with my own class, I might have those sheets there so they can work as a group and discuss things around the worksheets, and maybe especially around worries and things and where they feel that in the body, whilst I'm making the snow globes with another group. So that lends itself to a creative session or an outdoor session. I will always just try and roll with it. Yeah, and also when they do the wee balls, I bought some little actual physical wee balls, like toy wee balls, and trying to get them in a character that they'll remember they're not too old for. So you can't get them in everything, but there's something, I've got Teletubby ones which are still quite relevant even though it's not so cool, and I got like physical snow globes as well, so we can pass them around, and things like that really help, I think, to enhance the understanding around.
Yeah, so this is one of the first sessions where we've got the physical props sort of come into Paws B. So those of you that aren't familiar with Paws B, we have, as Chris has just mentioned, weebles and also snow globes. It's really lovely that you've had that opportunity to actually practically make some as well, because I think that's such a lovely session to do.
They don't take that long, actually. They don't take long at all. If you have the right equipment, it's like a bit of water, a bit of PVA, as clear PVA, you've got glycerin liquid, and you just drop in some glitter and some whatever little, some people put bits of Lego in there and just stuff and it just doesn't take very long to add it on if you can. Obviously it's difficult when you've got 30 children trying to get through making a snow globe or whatever, but if you've got smaller groups, it's something worth thinking about.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about a fellow trainer of ours who, she was telling me about the fact that she got the sort of balance wrong and had so much glue, because part of what we're doing is showing
nothing move,
and all of the sparkly bits are stirred up, but because so much glue, that when she said, and when we're still, everything just settles, it took a really long time.
That's
all of
quite funny. Yeah, you might want to practice beforehand. Yeah.
yeah,
But they love it, and they can go, they use it. So in my Zen room, they've all got their names on, they're all in individual ones, they've chosen their colour of the water and stuff, and they go to it all the time, and they use it. And it's just an extra tool, isn't it, for kind of that calming or regulating emotions. So it's well worth it, I'd say, if you've got the time to invest, because there's something about them making their own that is really powerful for that child to have their own.
yeah. And lovely for them to have that as an example. They can maybe show their families at home if they take it home, or
Yeah.
even have it in their drawer, or depending on how big it is, that they can look at and see as something that sort of demonstrates that kind of being,
Yeah.
stopping for a moment so that you can allow it all to settle and
Mhm.
see things more clearly. It's just such a lovely analogy, isn't it?
Mhm.
Just looking at the rest of this lesson, then we've got finger breathing as one of the practices. I was just wondering if there's any adaptation you make in the way that you offer that practice.
I mean, choices as well. I think it's sensory issues, obviously, for some children can be quite massive and quite distracting. And a lot of children notice that it's quite tickly or they don't like the sensation. So just giving choices around squeezing the finger, even imagining them running their finger up and down it. They don't have to physically touch the finger. Most children just do like that. And it's one of the more popular, definitely one of the popular practices, finger breathing. But yeah, just choices around what feels comfortable for them. So it's not becoming a chore or is something they have to find their way with it. Yeah, I think generally speaking though, just knowing the mood in the room as well. So keeping practices. Sometimes I might just say, if I know they're a bit unsettled or it's going to ask them too much to do, I'll just say do one set of fingers, and then sometimes we end it that quickly. And other times I'll say, when you get to the end, this is the bit where if you just trace it round, or imagine you're going around the hand, that's the bit where if you get a bit distracted or whatever, don't worry, just come back. It gives you time to think about where your mind is and just reconnect again. But yeah, it just depends on the mood of the room, I think, as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. It's helpful to just know that there are different ways you can offer it to just help it be a more accessible practice. But I agree, this is one of the most popular ones because it's that connection between movement and noticing breathing. Yeah, so I'm going to move into lesson 6 now. So just wondered what you do. You mentioned something before about we've got two versions of Pawsby. It's really more or less the same content,
Yeah.
but there are different visuals in our older version of Pawsby compared to our current. And you were saying you use both. You use both.
Yeah, I do dip into the old version, definitely sometimes. And they really, really loved the animal pictures. Maybe because I was doing it with a slightly younger cohort. They're really into cats and dogs and lots of sharing stories around their own puppies and their own pets. And then a few children said, oh, well, I like cats. And I said, oh, I know where we can get a cat picture from. So just digging out the old slide where there's lots of kind of cats showing different moods and where they're acting. And yeah, it just always creates a real buzz in the room, because again, it's an opportunity for some group discussion. So I'll I deliberately put them in slightly bigger groups or pairs or threes. So they're really encouraging that kind of sharing of ideas. And they love telling a story with the pictures as well. But yeah, it's lovely. And you're reinforcing that message also, that actually someone's happy face might be somebody else's shocked face. It might look happy, but so looking more into detail about actually it's not always that black and white, and then you do come to it later on, don't you, with the storytelling mind, and sometimes we need to find a bit more information before we can really get to the facts. So this is like a gentle introduction to moods and emotions, but I try and get in there. It's not always that obvious. Sometimes we need to find out a little bit more about what's going on with our friends or our families or our pets to really know what they're feeling. But they do love the pictures. They can really connect with them, I think, especially, yeah. I do like the animal ones particularly. I find that they get really excited about that.
So you were saying that your most recent after school club group really understood that very well, and
Yeah.
about the fact that faces can actually be showing different emotions and we're reading them in a particular way. So we're sort of about interpretation.
Yeah. I was quite surprised for their age actually. And I'm hoping, like I say, I did a bit of videoing of the children. I'm hoping that with parental permission, I can maybe share that and explore that a bit more, because it was really quite insightful. And that's a good thing actually, that children seem to be quite well connected with their emotions and others. I think I was quite surprised in a way
Mm.
that they were so able to relate and understand and discuss feelings and moods in a really, like, they use words like curious or frustrated or things that are more, even more delicate than just happy, sad. There's more, there might be more complexity around it. Yeah,
Mm.
it was just there's just a really lovely kind of discussion starter.
Yeah, I have to say that these two lessons are some of my favourite lessons, and it's partly because the discussion does begin to evolve a bit more, it gets a bit deeper. And just to say, of course, that we differentiate to some extent through outcome a little bit in terms of the fact that not all children will be able to necessarily do that, and you just light touch it if that is the case. But if there's room and you can feel for the fact that the students are really wanting to share their noticing and their kind of understanding of what you're sharing with them or exploring together. It's so nice, like you said, to be able to give that a bit of space,
Mm, mm, mm.
those discussions. Yeah. So there's another kind of just following on from the slides of the puppies' moods, and then we come to, and if you want, you can insert kittens' moods, which is what Chris was just referring to there. And then there's another slide that shows human children faces with different moods as well. And there's an additional aspect to this in the lesson that wasn't in the original version, which is something called pull a pose. And it's one of my absolute favourite things to do because it involves asking the children to tune into noticing what's it like when you feel excited and showing that, and then explaining what they're noticing in their body. And for me, it just then is a really lovely segue into what they do in the next two sessions, where they're identifying what happens in the body when they feel stress reaction. So I really like the fact that this is quite a gentle sort of way into that, and the fact that our body gives us clues as to how we're feeling is a really helpful bit of learning. But also, it's just always really good fun seeing everybody kind of pulling their feeling pose, as it were, in the room. I'm not sure if you've used that, Chris, but
Yeah, I have, yeah. And you can definitely, because as soon as they get into those positions, you can then name them. Even if they can't verbalize it, you can say, "Oh, I can see that your fists are clenched." So you can do the kind of vocabulary around that because you've got your image, and they are very good at kind of straightway getting into a pose that they. And interesting when you feel happy and that kind of openness as well, kind of exploring that, because I do like to always have that kind of the other side of the worry and the stress. I'm like, it's really important that we don't give ourselves a hard time. I try and get that in early if I can in lots of different ways, not to be hard on ourselves, that we can be kinder to ourselves when we do feel this as well, and not to worry if we've lost our temper or we've had a tantrum or whatever. This will pass, and going back to the snow globes, and things will settle and we'll get through it. And so it's trying to bring it in where it feels right to bring it in. You don't necessarily have to follow the route of the lessons. If you know the whole package, you can then bring things in that are going to be useful even earlier on.
Yeah, well, I was thinking actually just about puppy training and the fact that in that lesson we do talk about kindness in the way that we are with each other
Yeah,
then, don't
yeah,
we?
yeah, we do. Yeah, right early on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is introduced at that point. So that, yeah, nice to hear that you weave it through the other lessons as well, reinforcing that
Mm.
idea. And of course, it comes out more explicitly later.
And also, you've got the gymnastics little video in lesson 6, haven't you? Where you've got the gymnast who's a really pivotal part of her career, and I think it's part of the Olympics or whatever it was. And so we talk a lot about the pressure on her when she falls off the beam, and but actually what amazing resilience she has. And we turn that on do a lot. They love the fact that they're really proud of her, that she didn't stomp off and cry and she got on with it. And again, that's all reinforcing that, isn't it, as well? That kind of just making the best of the worst scenario in that case is I've lost the medal, but I can still have a nice time or get to the end and be applauded. So yeah.
It's all about levels, isn't it, of things like in relation to that the gymnast. I mean, clearly she's incredible at what she does, and it's
Yeah.
sometimes I just draw their attention to that. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
I can't do that, can you?
Yeah, that's true. On a basic level, wow. Yeah, yeah. This is true.
Um, So then the final practice in lesson 6 is the Fofbok. And of course, this practice is one that's across all of our curricula. And just interested to hear how you've got on with offering that.
Yeah, so with The younger ones are. The thing is, it's really hard to say, oh, I do it for a short time or a long time, but I do like to have them on chairs if I've got enough chairs, because I think it's that kind of what I try and focus on with the FOF book is that sense of anchoring, connection, and that kind of weight pulling down, steadying. And so for me, I like to get them on a chair. I don't care too much anymore how their posture is. I used to, but I don't anymore because I've realised that really isn't part of it, the important bit at all. So I've got some quite energetic children that kind of, it's very difficult to keep, they're wrapping their feet around the legs of the chair or they're swinging them. So as long as they've got safe chairs, and then I'll say, just safe chairs, so you're not swinging on them, so you can, but I don't mind how they sit or how still they sit necessarily. But the kind of scanning can, from the feet up to the belly, can be very swift if it needs to be, because again, it's about reading the room. And if you're noticing that, there's bubbly there, then I'll just keep it really short and sweet, and other times longer. And I use the dots, an analogy of being in our bubbles and coming to a space first to settle before starting it. And by the way, I always use the word bottom, but I like the word bottom, so what can I say? I don't tend to change that very much, and it doesn't seem to create any problems with my kids. So yeah, I like feet on floor, bottom on chair. But yeah.
I think that very much comes from the age that you approach.
Yeah, for sure. And knowing your class, sometimes it's just you can't. When I was an external pools teacher in a long time ago, and I probably would have been a bit more wary about using that and just using body on chair. But within my own school and knowing the kids knowing me, and I know them really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I started this with, I think my very first group were 14-year-old boys. So
Okay.
yeah, it was body on.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it.
Not for Paws B, I hasten to add, it was for Dot B when I first started.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, and like you were just saying there about how long the practice would take,
Mm.
it's one of our longer practices. I think it's potentially the longest practice in Paws B. But like you said, you're reading the room, you're adapting it for, what's happening in front of you. And it tends to be when you first introduce a longer practice, they're not used to it, so it needs to be shorter. And then gradually, as they get more familiar with it and you go through the rest of the course, you can expand it
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're more used to it.
Yeah, they're better at training their attention, aren't they?
But I agree with you that, because I think from what I heard, you were saying that really the focus for this practice is about them getting the fact that it's an anchoring, grounding practice, and it steadies them. It's like that bottom bit of the weeble, it's that heavy base.
Yeah.
And that's just to steady them when they're noticing moods that make them feel wobbly. That's the most important thing. It's not them being completely still or having perfect posture or lasting for 8 minutes. It's that that's important. So I
Yeah,
really agree with
sure.
you. Yeah. Thank you so much, Chris,
No worries. It's been a pleasure to chat to
for
you.
your experiences with us. It's just been really valuable. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
you're very welcome. Thank you.